So on today's podcast, only 20% of employees in the world right now feel connected to their organizational culture. And yet 90% say that that is exactly what they want. Yet when that is missing, they become disengaged, and it's easy for them to shift their focus from the team to their own individual pursuits. The ecosystem of the culture is the most important thing. When that's missing, people default to their own ego system, focusing on self. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. We are at close to 240 episodes now, and maybe we're over it. We're going so fast. We got so much great stuff happening that it's hard to keep track of how many episodes, but we're in season 8. So awesome to have the new people joining the podcast. Welcome to everybody who's new to the podcast. Continues to grow, spread, reach new people and places, and we're getting great feedback about it. So thanks to everybody that continues to share and do all those things. To those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, you are the OGs. Thank you. So glad that this continues to add value to your life and your work. And my commitment to you, the listener, is that I hope each one of these pods is a chance for you to step back, take a deep breath, think about your life, your work, think about the temperature that you're trying to set, the culture that you're trying to create with the people around you. And then I hope that you get a little oxygen, some good oxygen that's breathed into you so that you can think about these things in some different ways, and it adds value to your life and your work and everything that you're trying to create. So I'm so glad you are here. Before we dive into today's topic, if you will do me the quick favor, huge favor, smash that 5-star button, just hit it, and whatever platform you're on, that's super helpful. If you'll leave an authentic review in your own words on whatever platform you use, that is super helpful as well for the algorithms to find it. I keep being told to do this, so that's why I'm sharing it. And also thanks to everybody who shares the podcast, whether that's on social media, you say, hey, here's an episode that resonated with me, sharing it with your team at work and saying, let's talk about this, let's listen and talk about the questions, sharing it with colleagues, however you share it, that helps amplify these messages further into the world, and for that, I'm very grateful. So thanks to everybody that does that. Only 20% of employees in the world right now feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% say that that is exactly what they want. That's according to a recent Gallup study. People want to feel connected, engaged, they want to feel like they belong, and they want to be participants in helping grow a cultural ecosystem into the future. Yet when that is missing, they become disengaged, and it's easy for them to shift their focus from the team to their own individual pursuits. It becomes normal to just, quote unquote, look out for yourself. Research tells us that people, the ecosystem of the culture is the most important thing that people want. But yet when that culture and that ecosystem doesn't feel authentic and real and alive, when that's missing, people default to their own ego system, focusing on self. So on today's podcast, we're talking about the fact of reminding ourselves that culture is a dynamic, always changing and evolving ecosystem of the way we think, act, and interact with everyone within our system. And our job as leaders and culture-shaping ambassadors is to tend to the soil and intentionally support the ecosystem. And as Adrienne Marie Brown says in her book, Emergent Strategy, I love this quote. She says, "The role of organizers in an ecosystem is to be earthworms, processing and aerating the soil, making fertile ground out of the nutrients of sunlight, water, and everything that dies to nurture the next cycle of life." With that, I'll say leaders and culture ambassadors help set the temperature and that climate. They tend to the soil for the ecosystem so that the whole ecosystem can grow. But before we dive into today's podcast, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. People want to feel connected to the culture. They want to feel connected to their own cultural ecosystem. But when they become disengaged, they revert back to their own personal ego system, where self is first and team ecosystem is an afterthought. So eco, is what they want, but when it's not there, they revert back to ego, thinking about themselves first rather than the ecosystem of the team and the culture as a whole. And so I'm not blaming them or pointing fingers. That's just a natural result of human behavior when people start to feel disengaged with the team or an organization. They want to feel like they connect and they belong and they are an important participant in creating that future ecosystem. But when it's not there, they become disengaged and then they begin to focus on their own ego system, focusing on themselves first. So culture, again, is dynamic, as you know, and I always talk about this. It's always growing and evolving. And so it's not a question of will it change. You know, every garden, everything that's growing is, of course, always changing. So it's not will it change, it's what role are we going to play in what it becomes. And will we just sit back and let the ecosystem become whatever, reactionary, whatever it's going to become on its own? Or do we as intentional leaders want to help support the growth and proactive climate of the soil and the ecosystem as a whole? So obviously, you know that my research study and direct support with teams and organizations is rooted in the belief, and I've witnessed this in my own observations, experiences, that authentic and compelling culture shaping, it doesn't just magically happen. The best cultures, the best gardens, if you will, the best ecosystems are groomed. The conditions are cared for. They are intentionally designed and are led and supported so that the growth can take place. We can't make things grow, but we can create the conditions for them to grow. So many prospective clients often ask me, but when will our culture be quote unquote done? Or when will we know it's working? Or how will we measure it? And all of these are normal and certainly understandable questions. But the truth and reality is that culture shaping is never done. The garden or the ecosystem is never complete. And so how do you measure it? Well, again, we talked about this on a recent podcast of doing a organizational culture audit, and I talked about a process to take the temperature and see, but that's to assess the progress based on the growth and vision and kind of the beauty of the current day ecosystem. But it's all meant to be a one-time taking of the temperature so that you can get back to, again, that ongoing living and breathing ecosystem. And well, what is it we can do to make the ecosystem stronger? So it's all about being able to continue to tend to the ecosystem. And so you prune the areas that are killing off elements of the garden, and you create space for new growth to occur. And leaders never stop tilling, nurturing, feeding, and supporting the soil. So I was talking with a friend not too long ago who talked about getting a flower pot, at their local Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever it was, and just kind of plopping it in the ground. They just kind of got it and just plopped it in there, and the beautiful potted plant. And then they were confused later why it wasn't growing, and finally realized that it wasn't about the plant. The plant itself was good. What the product they got was good. The reason why it wasn't growing is that it was about the soil, and it was about the fact that they weren't really taking care of it, that they hadn't, the depth of the hole that they had dug, the soil that it went into, the caring for the soil and taking care of the watering of all the things, the richness and prep of the soil is everything. But in our quick fix, microwavable or air fryer world, the ecosystem growth takes longer, but it's also richer. A few years ago, my family, we were lucky to be on an adventure to go travel and visit the Galapagos Islands, off the coast of Ecuador. And really an immersion into a real look at real ecosystems that are alive and at work. And I remember as we spent time learning about the ecosystem and all the things that were at play to make this beautiful, beautiful place alive and rich and so complex, that one of the naturalists that was with us along the way and was sharing and teaching us about all this stuff, he talked about the three types of species that they have in the Galapagos Islands. One is a native species, and these are the species of plants and wildlife that are native to that area and have been there from the very beginning of time. Native species are common and are often found in other parts of the world, but examples of these would be like the mangrove trees or flamingos and other wildlife that you can find in other locations around the world. But the native species, they also, were native to the Galapagos Islands. So you can find them other places around the world, but they're native to that part of the world that you're looking at. Then there are endemic species. Endemic species. These are species that are unique only to this spot in the world. These are species that have been adapted over time to be able to live solely in that location and cannot be found anywhere else. So examples in the Galapagos are marine iguanas, these really special iguanas that have adapted and are only found in the Galapagos. Blue-footed boobies. Those are, again, another thing, and don't worry, our kids and we giggled every time they would say this. And also a certain type of Galapagos penguins are all endemic species, unique only to that spot in the world. And then the third type of species they have in the Galapagos are introduced species. Introduced species. These are the species that are not native to the island and can be found in other parts of the world, but only become introduced to the ecosystem by coming to the islands with travelers or somehow on their own. And so examples of this would be species like ants, rats, goats. They're found elsewhere, and they travel. They're introduced to that ecosystem by getting there, either traveling on their own or people bringing them over with their travels. So the ecosystem is continuing to grow and adapt based on how each of these species affect each other and the changing elements in the world, such as the climate, pollution, and the visitors that are coming in and out of the ecosystem. So trust me, this isn't a science lesson, but I'm sharing this as context because I love this image, because every team on the planet experiences these three elements as they grow and mature their own cultural ecosystem. They have native species, those that started with the organization, and types of employees that you can find kind of those same type of employees other places, but they've been native to your place, right? And so then there are also endemic species that are unique only to your organization. And it's hard to find others like them in other organizations because they're so unique to you and to your organization. And then, of course, there are the introduced species, new employees, new hires, new people that are brought into the organizations. The natives are the people who might have been on the team from the beginning or some of the first employees to jump on board, and they are familiar with the way of life on your island. And they play a role that is probably very similar to roles that you can find on other islands or other companies in other ecosystems. But they hold an important place in the infrastructure and in the ecosystem, and they provide a nice foundation to keep the ecosystem balanced because they've been around, they've been native to the team and to the organization from the very beginning. And endemic species, these are the unique players, the unique or members, teammates who have been adapted to the very specific ways in which you get things done on your island or in your ecosystem. These are the very specialized contributors who have learned how to grow, develop, and adapt only in your climate. And they're really not, they're not necessarily a plug and play and found in other climates or other ecosystems. They are unique to your team, to your company, and your group. And they might not be nearly as effective or even adaptable elsewhere. They're really endemic to your ecosystem. And last are the introduced species. As every team or organization grows and matures over time, new people are introduced to the ecosystem. And so outsiders jump aboard and make their way into living within the ecosystem. The ecosystem, then adjusts and reacts and responds to these new species, and together they start to create what the new normal is. So when we think about onboarding these new introduced species into a culture, part of that assimilation is bringing them into understanding what is that vision for the cultural ecosystem we're trying to create, but also recognizing they are going to bring something new and contribute, and the ecosystem is going to continue to evolve in new ways. So each of the different species within every team or every cultural ecosystem has an impact on the others, and all play a particular role, and they see things from a unique perspective. They all belong to the culture, but they're in need of leadership to help them work together to maximize the environment, somebody to help, again, care for the ecosystem. So after you step back and you assess where you are, and you also assess who are the species that we have involved in our own ecosystem. And in healthy ecosystems, they're thinking about all of their species and helping them develop and contribute together. And we know that the best leaders in culture shaping remember that the ecosystem is more powerful than the ego system. The ecosystem of the culture always takes precedence over their own ego as a leader or personal achievement. Best teams tend the soil of the ecosystem rather than the ego of individual efforts. The eco is over the ego. What's best for the ecosystem? What's best for our culture? And then what is the temperature we need to set to care for the ecosystem? So, as always, I'll leave you with some questions to ponder. In what ways does your cultural ecosystem need to be fed, supported, pruned, watered, nurtured? In what ways can your team keep the ecosystem as a higher priority than the ego system? So I hope today's episode got you thinking in some new ways, and I hope if any of this information or helping to care or support your ecosystem is helpful, I hope you'll track us down through the website, jasonvbarger.com, or send us a message, email info@jasonvbarger.com, and we'll follow up with you, and we'll see how we can best support you and contribute to that ecosystem that you're continuing to build into the future. Again, I hope you'll go back, check out old episodes. I hope you'll hit the 5-star button. I hope you'll leave an authentic review. I hope you'll share these episodes with the people around you so this can get you all talking and sharing about your own ecosystem or any of the other topics that might be value to your team and your organization. But remember that the future of leadership and culture shaping is you, is me, is us. We have an opportunity to set the temperature that we're aiming for, and then to have the courage to continue to show up and breathe good oxygen into ourselves and to the people around us. The best leaders, teams, and cultures stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat together and then breathing oxygen into each other along the way to keep it sustainable. So remember, step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.